So, a conversation I've been having today with some peers, and want to continue to think more about is whether diversity or racial equity training should be mandatory for all teachers. And I believe it should, but I'm definitely interested in hearing perspectives on why people don't think it is. I think there's some valid logistical reasons why people don't think it is. It shouldn't be mandatory or things like that. But so yeah, if you have thoughts on whether this type of training should be mandatory for all teachers, I'd love to hear what you think below or in comments on Facebook. But the reason I believe it's mandatory is because I believe like racial equity and that in diversity. I don't really like using that word, but to describe what we're talking about. But racial justice, racial equity is part of being a teacher. I believe it is absolutely an essential aspect of being a teacher. And if that is the case, then there should be training around it because there should be accountability around it. And if we are expecting, I would never hold a student accountable for something that I didn't train them to do. And I think that sometimes we do that in education, and we need to look for places where we do that, where we expect students to have a specific skill or to be able to do something or know something, but we didn't really actually spend time on it. We didn't really get into that aspect of the training. And so when it comes to this work, I believe that teachers do need to be held accountable to ensure that their practices are equitable and just, and that they are analyzing their implicit bias and their the lens in which they view the world that may negatively impact students of color and in other identities as well, right? But so often we center race because it is the most egregious and most prolific and most historic form of discrimination in schools and disparities in schools. And when you break down the data, race always plays is the biggest factor of racial predictability of discipline rates, of graduation rates, of grade point average, of all these different pieces. And so yeah, it's like I think if we should hold the teachers accountable to it, and if we're going to, we should make sure that there's training around it. And we can't guarantee that it's coming out of schools, programs, teacher education programs, and there's so little done to really connect teacher programs with the needs of schools and the needs of districts. And I would really, it's not something I can take on or put on my plate, but I'd really love to hear from college educators that are prepping the future educators about what's being done to really prepare teachers for these types of conversations and to be analytical and critical of racial bias in their curriculum, in their practice, in their school, in their policies, all these different pieces. So yeah, there's definitely obstacles, I think, to making this type of work mandatory, and it definitely doesn't solve everything, right? Starbucks closing down for a few hours and doing training doesn't solve everything, but what it can do is provide that accountability of saying, look, we don't expect you to be perfect, but this is what we believe in, this is our priority, this is our emphasis, and we provided you with some training around this, and we are going to hold you accountable to that training and to continue to explore that and to continue looking at that. So no, it's not going to make people that are overtly racist or people that are unaware or racially unconscious all of a sudden be doing everything right, but it can be a starting point, and it can provide some accountability moving forward. So I don't know what it looks like perfectly, but yes, I believe all teachers should receive racial equity or racial diversity training, and that they should be held accountable to make sure that their classroom is living that in their work.